Yep.
Welcome everyone. Oh my gosh. So much fun to do that. All right, welcome to Sustainability in Hops, Fruit, and Malt. My name is Jen. I don't have anything to do with this other than to introduce the presenters. We have Patrick, who's the New England Territory Manager for CMG, Ashleigh, who is the Field Marketing Manager for Yakima Chief, and then Bret Kollmann Baker, who's the co-founder and COO at Urban Artifact and the beer ambassador at Boiron? Okay, America. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Patrick. Go right ahead.
Sweet.
Thank you, guys.
What am I doing to move slow too?
Just that little arrow. Yep.
Gotcha. I don't want to give that. Hey guys, my name is Patrick Sylvester. For those that don't know me, I'm the territory manager for CMG. I cover all of New England. And I also used to brew here in New York for the last 10 years, so I'm not full of shit when I talk about what I'm about to talk about. Today I want to discuss the sustainability and more importantly, the agroeconomic impact in regards to the malt industry. So things I want to cover, one, I want to go over why my malt price went up. Right? Over the last 2 years, we've seen a massive increase in malt pricing, and I'm here to kind of tell you guys a little bit behind the curtain that it's justified and we're seeing some massive changes. Will it ever stop? Solid question. And sustainable actions that were taken at the malt house, in the fields and at the DC Center, and what to expect for the 2023 and the year ahead. So let's get into it. Why did my malt price go up? So a couple of things before I get into the sustainability. It's really important to note that in 2022 we saw sort of a political sustainability element when it comes to barley. And when I brewed, I never really considered barley as a global commodity in the way that it is, and not only a global commodity in the barley market, but really mainly barley competes in all cereals, right? So when we see a strain on the wheat market, that affects the price of barley, directly, and I'll explain that a little further. So Russia and Ukraine, for those that don't know, they export about 15% of the world's global wheat supply. So when we're seeing these political efforts where that territory gets locked up and we can't really get the exports out of there, the wheat demand doesn't go away, right? Consumers are still buying wheat, there's still a need for it. So we're having wheat purveyors go to our fields that are typically growing barley, and they're saying, hey, can you grow a bushel for $10? I'll pay you $10 per bushel to grow wheat. Well, now I have to go, or not me personally, but CMG has to go and say, no, stick with growing barley, I'll pay you $11, right? So again, you see the increase. We're competing against other cereals. That same increase is happening in the feed barley market, right? Over the last 2 years, we've seen the feed barley market almost double in price. For those that don't know, feed barley is a hell of a lot easier to grow than malting barley. So if I'm a farmer and I was getting paid $8 a bushel to grow malting barley, but now I can get $8 to grow feed barley, well, hell, I'm going to grow feed barley, right? Makes a hell of a lot more sense for them in terms of risk analysis. So just some more kind of overarching factors of explaining some of the other elements that we saw happen in the last couple of years. Freight and utilities. That's the actual train that your grain comes on. Freight and utilities. I mean, we all know it. It's nothing new, but just to see the actual increases that we saw over the last couple of years. Natural gas had almost a 4 times increase from 2020 to 2022. That's a lot, right? And just as much as it costs to heat your house, well, a malt house runs on natural gas, right? The kiln runs on natural gas. The warehouses run on natural gas. So we're not impervious to these sort of increases. Diesel fuel, we've seen the price of diesel go almost double over the last 2 years. Again, something that we all see, just something that we have to keep an eye on and making sure that we're understanding that these are factors into the price increase that we saw. But mainly, the one that I want to talk about in the realm of sustainability is what we saw out of the 2021 crop year, what it means for us, and what the ripple effect is going to look like that. For those, I'm sure we're all aware, but 2021 was a pretty bad harvest, right? We suffered a lot of environmental impact, and it really kind of put us in a bad spot. 2021, we got poor crop yield, less than ideal kernel size, protein levels were high, and it forced us to deplete our backstock. This is the main thing that I think a lot of breweries don't have a general idea in terms of what this means to the barley market as a commodity, and kind of want to show just the risk associated with it. As a domestic malt supplier, we were forced to bring in some European barley. That doesn't come without a price, right? That doesn't come without a carbon footprint added onto it. So just things that we need to be aware of when we're seeing the ripple effect of this. Spoiler alert, 2022 did return to an average crop year, so we were able to get out of it. But I told somebody today, up like a rocket, down like a feather, right? It's going to take a lot more good years in a row to kind of mitigate the downward trend that we saw. So by the numbers, right? So I want to talk more about this backstock idea in terms of barley, right? On a year-to-year basis, it's common practice, and we want to have a backstock that travels from year to year that we can start pulling and help transition into the new crop year, right? In an ideal world, this backstock number stays stagnant, stays the same. That means that your supply and your demand are at a nice balance, and that number stays the same. So we went into 2021 with 711, these are MMTs, so 1,000 metric tons. By the end, after the poor crop year, we got down to 409,000 metric tons. Now take a look at that. That's a loss of 302 assumed 1,000 metric tons. And now if anybody's doing some quick math, if we had a back-to-back bad year, that would have put us in a really bad spot, right? We would have been down in the hundreds, right? So in terms of risk analysis of the barley market, drought concerns and environmental change, it's an issue, right? It's something that we need to be paying attention to. Canada and the United States, it was a downward trend of about 42% of what our typical backstock should have been. And we're still seeing domestic and foreign consumption, stay the same or if not grow, right? The foreign market is starting to pull more barley from it. So we need to get ahead of this and start planning to get more out of our fields or find more growers to grow more barley. Just a further breakdown, right? Just to see where all that barley went. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, don't worry. So we started in 2021, again, that's 711. Down, production that year was about 7 million metric tons, and we ended after all was said and done with about, again, that 409,000. The next year we were able to produce about 10 million, that's an average year for Canadian barley. But we're seeing a little bit of an increase in the export, right? Look at this export number of 1,800 versus 2,400. That's a growing market that we should be keeping our eyes on in terms of who's pulling from our barley pot and what we're doing to accommodate them, plus domestic brewers as well. And then the big number here is, take a look at the 10-year average. The backstock on barley was typically about almost 2 million metric tons over the last 10 years. So we started 2021 well behind the 8 ball, and we ended even further behind the 8 ball. And just one more time to punch the doom and gloom home, this is the ending crop of Canadian barley over the last 20 years. Again, just a general downtrend as we're seeing consumption go up, and then climate change kind of affecting the environmental impact and the amount that we're getting out of the field. So it's something that we take very seriously. We want to get ahead of it and make sure that we're accommodating for the new areas. So what's driving this, right? And in terms of a climate change, we're seeing drought frequency take off, right, in Canada. What used to happen, according to environmental scientists, what was happening once every 20 years is something that's now happening once every 5 years. The greater climates, we're just seeing greater extremes, right? The wetter climates are getting wetter, the drier climates are getting drier. And we're seeing a shift in the climate zones. This is a really interesting one to look at on a map, where you can actually see the physical change in climate zones that need to be accounted for. And again, this idea of the increased global consumption. Barley usage is still going up, if not flatlining, and we need to get ahead and make sure that we're accommodating. These are two cool maps that I like. So this is a drought monitoring map of the United States. This one's from back in 2014, and this one was back from 2021. You can see that in 2014, the drought zone is as you would think, right? I mean, southwest United States, dry climate, nothing surprised there. But as you're seeing in 2021, right, we're starting to see some drought patterns really kind of take off in those upper prairies and the lower parts of Canada. A good chunk of your barley comes from that. So we're seeing this climate change kind of move up into these new areas. Do you have any good news? Yeah, I know. I can feel it, right? I do. So we are, like I said, we are aware of this. It's more of an update in terms of what we're struggling with and what we're focusing on. One of the things is that we're increasing the planting on varietals that are suitable for new climates. Right? We're seeing in this graph below that where we saw Kollmann and Metcalf kind of dominate the fields of Canada, we're seeing a rise in some new varietals that are coming through. The Connects, the Fraser, the Bow, Copper, and Sirish. These guys are all, a little bit more suited for the drier climate, and they're also producing a little bit more per acre. If you know anything about agriculture, it's tough to get a farmer to change, but this is a positive trend that we're seeing. We're getting guys kind of buying into this idea and making sure that they're aware of this problem as well. Work is being done on new varietals, right? There is some crossbreeding go on to try and breed out some water dependence out of barley. So that's something that's on the horizon. Nothing to report just yet, but it is something that our scientists are working on. And working with our farmers to adopt sustainable practices. On a brewery level, what do you take from this information? Every little bit helps, right? So we're starting with the farmer, being a little bit more fuel efficient, fertilizer efficient, energy usage efficient, It's something that we need to take seriously, and people need to start chipping in everywhere we can. And then again, just kind of talk about those new varietals, the better performing varietals. The velocity of their increase in the field is pretty impressive. Again, when you think about agriculture, change doesn't happen overnight, but we're seeing a sort of a different trend in terms of people taking this very seriously and understanding change needs to happen. Sustainable efforts at the plant. So on the malting side, I can only speak for CMG because that's the only one that I know. But Canada Malting, we've installed a CO2 recapture system at our Calgary plant. It's not the same as what you guys are using on the brewery floor, but this one's capturing our emissions and turning into a reusable product of potassium carbonate. Potassium carbonate is used in soaps and detergents, and I think I just got word the other day that we're going to have the soap at Nashville CBC, so come stinky. OptiSteep, this is in the malt house, right? We included the new OptiSteep technology, and this allows us to reduce our water consumption on the steeping phase by about 30%. In turn, also reducing our energy usage by about 10%. So exciting news on those fronts. And then finally, the most relevant to you guys, right, as brewers, is that CMG has adopted a malt bag recycling program. Like I said, I brewed for 10 years, and every time I go to the dumpster and throw one of those super sacks out or one of those bags out, you always think to yourself, where the hell is this going, right? It's going into the landfill. So we're working with our brewers. You have the option to kind of bundle up and log up our bags. We'll coordinate shipment to get them back to the warehouse, and we work them back into a single stream. Again, it's not going to change the world overnight, but it's efforts that we're putting forth to make sure that we're trying to keep this in mind. So looking ahead, right? I get it. What are you going to do with this information that I gave you, right? How, as a brewer, what are you going to use? And this is my last slide. How are you going to use the information that I presented? Well, when you're planning for your business, right, are we at the peak? And the answer is probably not, right? Plan for the worst and hope for the best. But you need to have a somewhat pessimistic view when you look at this to make sure that you're operating conservatively, right? You're planning for this. You're understanding that this is a real stressor on the industry, and you need to be able to adapt and pivot. Push for consumers and distributors to understand beer as an agricultural product. I wish I could get this line tattooed on my body. Because I can't, oh shit, do it. I think that this conversation needs to be more of a forefront. You're already seeing marketing efforts go towards it, but we need to have conversations with our consumers and our distributors of saying, hey, we are seeing the greater effects of this climate change, and that we are not, and we saw the slide from Bart Watson this morning, it used to be stable, and now we're starting to see some massive change in the market. We are not prone to those changes, and that needs to be educated. Import versus domestic malt. This is something that we're working on at CMG with a lot of our customers, but really evaluate the need of your import malt. And the sustainability, I get it, that some beers rely on it. You need that German pills or German wheat to kind of shine through, but do you need 100% of the grist, right? Do you need that one bag of German wheat, or can you possibly swap to a domestic option? Again, we're not here to change your portfolios, but it's something that you as brewers can kind of look upon and make a change if you need to. CapEx, for those that are lucky enough to be building out and increasing their brewery size, really consider the cost savings and the idea of grain handling. If you can take more grain at once, if you can get it all in one freight truckload, great. Even better. If you can handle super sacks, great. Eliminating that waste from the landfill. If you can handle a silo, even better. And then value and consistency. Bagged and mold contracts, commitment goes a long way. We're dealing with farmers that need commitment right now. We're in a competitive, atmosphere when it comes to wheat and all the other cereals. So commitment on the barley front goes a long way. And that's it.
So fruit's the same way. It's an agricultural product, and it all kind of sucks. So I'm not going to rehash too much of what Patrick said because it's the same. Just to take all those graphs that said barley and how costs are going up and supplies going down, and just slap whatever fruit that you use onto that graph, because that's exactly what's happening. So supply's tight, it's expensive, it's hard to get things. The Pacific Northwest is getting screwed. Michigan's getting screwed. I don't know how things exactly are in New York, but I'm guessing not great because apple prices have not exactly held steady. Things in Europe aren't looking hot either. The Ukraine-Russia conflict is really messing things up. A lot of raspberries, for instance, are grown in Serbia. Harvests have been hit or miss. South American stuff, currently they're dealing with inflation and governmental loss of control, which is impacting ability to get product up here. We got shipping issues if we're talking about imports. You know, those coconuts you like to get from Vietnam, for instance, well, they used to cost a lot of money. Thankfully, prices are starting to come down a little bit on that stuff. So there is a little bit of relief there. But this is a long way of saying that fruit's expensive. It's going to take years to build back up the stock that we lost over the last couple of years. And we're not looking at factoring in a couple more bad harvests. So assuming things kind of even out and we can handle the climate change stuff, it's going to be 2 to 3 years before you really start seeing fruit prices restabilize and come back down. To give you an example, I used to buy 5 years ago raspberry puree at $1.04 a pound. Delivered, it was like $1.15 a pound. And this is buying 250,000 pounds or so a year. I'm paying $3.49 a pound now, which is just, I mean, I don't even know how you make money on stuff like that. So relief isn't coming. So what do? So this is not going to be so much about agronomical sustainability as economical sustainability for you brewers. So I want to talk about the different type of options that you have available to you for fruit, because there's a bunch. And I know that everybody, as brewers, we tend to be romantics, right? We love the idea of fresh fruit. We love the idea of going to your local farm and using it and cutting all the fruit up or ripping those peaches in half, which if you've never ripped an overripe peach in half before, oh man, it feels real good for the first like 50 peaches. And then 1,000 pounds later, you know, you kind of want to die. But that first little bit is a lot of fun. Fresh fruit is great. It does have some issues with it. There is seed and solid removal issues. You can run into some issues of potentially lower yields than you would normally get otherwise. If you're not getting it local and you're buying it fresh from a distributor, there's a good chance that it was picked unripe and you're going to actually get lower quality than you would get if you just buy what the next thing is, which is frozen whole fruit, which you can buy either as straight pack, which is just slop in a bucket basically that's frozen into a brick, or you can buy it IQF, which is nice because then you can usually get it de-seeded. So you get some of the benefits of using fresh fruit while getting the frozen stuff. Now, both those are expensive. You're not paying much more, or you're not getting a ton of value there as brewers. You're paying for the raw ingredient, but you're getting the best product. You're getting all the skins, you're getting the fiber, you're getting the texture that you can pull from the fruit. You're saving all of the aroma with this fresh or frozen stuff. So it's high quality, romantic, hard to deal with, hard to scale. You can buy dehydrated fruit, which heat to remove water. You're cooking it basically, right? So I don't really recommend dehydrated, though I know that there's a lot of traditional applications, especially around orange peel and whatnot. But we live in a world where we can get fresh orange peel or fresh orange puree, and you don't need to use dehydrated products. So unless you're looking for a specific flavor profile, I generally, at our brewery, avoid dehydrated stuff. But it does help you save on shipping because you're not shipping around water weight. Different flavor profiles, yada yada. Freeze-dried's great, wonderful flavor, hella expensive. It's like, I'm talking like $30 a pound. Now this is like 11 to 1, 11 pounds of fresh get you 1 pound of that. You're still paying more for freeze-dried than you would just buying frozen puree or fresh fruit or frozen whole fruit. Which leads me right into the next thing, puree. This is my method of choice. It is nice because the seeds are removed, but the skins and the bulk of the meat and fiber and everything is still in there. So you can still get the impact, the mouthfeel, the tannins, the esters, the aromas, without having to deal with the seeds and solid fruits, which can be a pain to get out of your fermenter, or if you have a centrifuge, a pain to run through your centrifuge. Puree, on the other hand, I send all that slop right through our centrifuge. It's great. We have fantastic yields for it. My $200,000 centrifuge paid for itself in 6 months with the yield savings that we had from using purees. Like it's unbelievable. Wonderful. Puree, I like more than juice, but it's a little bit more expensive. Like I said, you get those skins and all the other flavor and color compounds in the puree that you don't necessarily get in the juice. So if you want to have the same flavor impact with your juice, you got to use a little bit more, but it is cheaper. You can get concentrates. There's 2 types of concentrates. You can get puree concentrates or you can get juice concentrates. If you're gonna go concentrate route, which is a little bit cheaper, because generally you can use lower grade quality fruit that's not fit for the grocery store, you can use that to make concentrates, and you get like 6 to 1 out of that. They're usually about 60 bricks You save a little bit on shipping that way because you might only need to buy a pail instead of a drum. They're pretty good. They're a nice in-between if you don't want to spring for purees. Now, the last two things, extracts and one-offs, this is where you're really going to start getting value as a brewer. Now, I'm sure we've all seen a blueberry beer before that is not blue, and when it comes out of the tap handle, you can smell it across the bar. I'd argue that's not a blueberry beer, but a blueberry flavored beer, which is a bit different. However, it's very cheap. There's a reason that the cheapest fruit beers out there are all usually back sweetened and flavored with flavorings, and they taste more like candy than they do the real fruit. It's because it's extracts, it's flavorings. Usually everything's natural anymore at this point in time. There's still some artificial flavorings out there. They're not great on their own, in my opinion. They lack depth. You don't actually have taste with flavorings. It's all aromatic compounds. There's no sweetness, there's no bitterness, there's no tannins, there's no anything for your tongue. It's all aroma, and you trick yourself as a customer into thinking that you're actually tasting stuff when you're really not. But when you pair those up with a puree, and so you can use less puree, and then you top up the aroma with an extract, you can save money on the puree by buying less, still get the impact from these tannins and the colors that the puree is going to give you, and get the aromatic punch that your customers are going to expect. The last thing is one-offs, which is kind of all of that wrapped into one for you as a brewer. If you're not familiar with one-offs, it stands for with other natural flavors. Basically, if you go out there and you say, I want a black raspberry one-off, what they'll give you is what is essentially white grape juice or apple juice with some colorings, with natural flavor added, and there will be a little bit of said fruit that you're buying in there. This is a good, if you're looking for a one-stop shop way to do it, and you just find a flavor house that you like, and you say, I want a black raspberry one-off, they'll send you one. You say, I don't think it has enough of this flavor, or it has too much of this, they'll adjust it. They're very customizable, it's very nice. It's a good way to kind of split hairs. It's important too when you're looking at things. In America, puree doesn't mean anything. It's not a protected term. In Europe, for instance, where Boron's based out of, puree means literally just pureed fruit. There's nothing added. It is just the fruit turned into slop with the seeds removed. And they could be in there too if you want, but usually seeds are removed. In America, puree could be anything. So you'll have suppliers reaching out to you saying they're selling X fruit puree, but if you look at the ingredients, it'll say water, sugar, dextrose, fructose, then the fruit as the first 5 ingredients. I don't know what your beliefs are on that, but to me, that ain't fruit puree. That's syrup, sugar syrup, flavored, which is fine. It has its place, but just be aware what you're consuming, what you're buying, and what you're going to pass on to your customers. I need to speed this up. All right. There's a lot of different ways to source fruit, and I recommend you explore all of them. There's a lot of wonderful fruit vendors here, like Boron, come see us. But there is more ways to buy fruit. You should hit your local farmers. You should find some national farmers, like King's Orchard in Michigan, which you may or may not have heard of. They're pretty great. They sell probably the best ballotons in the country. That you can buy from manufacturers, you can buy from puree suppliers, you can buy from wholesalers, you can buy from people who are getting stuff pureed in South America and shipped up. Just make sure you're getting samples. A lot of this stuff, sight unseen, can be dodgy. So get samples, make sure the color, aroma, and flavor is where you need it to be. If you're buying a puree, make sure it doesn't taste cooked, make sure it tastes like fresh fruit. If you're buying fruit, the location matters. Florida citrus versus Californian. Processing facility matters. I know a lot of new facilities. There's a lot of fruit agriculture developing in South America currently. A lot of these places are making it into a puree and then shipping it up to America, where American distributors are slapping their label on it and selling it to you. They don't have the institutional knowledge that we have in America for making purees, and a lot of these, especially aseptic varieties, can be a little bit dodgy and overcooked. So make sure you get samples, make sure you're being aware you're coming from, and if you're getting citrus, for instance, you can buy puree, you can buy peel, you can buy juice, but they're going to have different impacts. So figuring out how those tastes apply to what you want to use them for and matching up flavors in order to save yourself some money is the way to do it. Like if you buy a whole fruit citrus puree, it's going to be pithy, it's going to be bitter. So maybe cut a little bit back on how much hops you use, because you're going to have 2 different types of clashing bitterness. So you can save a little bit of money there. Fuck. 2 more minutes. There's a lot to consider about making fruit beer. So do you want fruit first? Do you want beer first? you got acid that comes into play here. You don't normally have that as a brewer. Normally it's just sweetness and bitterness, right? Those are the only two flavor considerations that we need to balance. Well, when you're introducing fruit and a lot of it, now we have acidity. And I don't know about you, but a bitter strawberry doesn't taste very good. So if you're making a strawberry IPA, to me, that's not something I want to drink because I don't want bitter fruit beer. However, there is obviously demand for that, yada yada. You can make New England styles, et cetera, et cetera. Just considerate of the fruit flavors that you're doing and how bitterness can oftentimes clash. And I know IPAs sell like crazy and everybody wants to slam every IPA onto every label, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the best for the product or the beer or what your customers expect. If you're looking to save money, like we talked about, there's one-ups, there's real fruit plus natural extracts, and there's a lot of colors. You can punch things up, and you can do this without going outside of the realm of natural. You can buy powdered grape skin extracts made from red grapes. I know Phantasm's all the rage right now, and that's just powdered white grapes. Well, you can buy powdered red grape skins and get amazing color. If you've made a natural strawberry beer before, you might have noticed it looks like flesh colored and it's really gross because strawberries aren't actually have that much red in them when you bite into them and they oxidize really easily. Well, you can cheat that by buying a little bit of red grape skin extract. And that way you can maybe get away with a little bit less strawberry, punch up that color a little bit, or buy a different fruit that has more color impact, like a prickly pear or black currant. There's a brewery in Ohio called Wolf's Ridge, if you haven't heard of them. They make a strawberry beer that's phenomenal. In a 10-barrel batch, they'll add 40 pounds of black currant puree into their strawberry beer. It's beautifully pink. So there's ways to cheat these things, that we can use modern science and flavor chemistry to make things taste and look like we want and what our customers expect. Because ultimately, I'm sure you've noticed, talking to the general beer consumer before, they can be dumb. And they might not know what an apricot is because people don't eat fruit in this country very much. We had a nectarine beer that we had to discontinue because the number one complaint was people told us they didn't know what a nectarine was, which what the hell does that mean? We don't know what a nectarine is. So you got to be considerate of what your customers' expectations are and kind of lean into that and use flavor profiles and our knowledge around flavor chemistry to push things in a direction that's going to be approachable, and that can save you money. And yeast. You can leverage yeast and the different things that yeast can do, obviously, to mimic and enhance fruit flavors too. If you're making a beer, if you're making a stone fruit beer, using a yeast that pushes apple or other stone fruit esters up can be really beneficial, and you can cheat it a little bit by pushing those flavors up. There's also tannins. I know it's huge in the wine world, but you can buy tannins as well to up the mouthfeel. So you can buy fruit puree. If it doesn't have the grippiness that you want, you can literally buy just powdered extracted tannin, whether it's from oak or whether it's from grape. You can actually even buy red berry tannins, and you can add that, and it gives you an increased mouthfeel and a little bit more grippiness on the palate, and it really can enhance the perceived fruit flavor. Now, to me, there's no issue with any of this stuff. We're not the natural wine world. We're not beholden to these bullshit anti-science things that we decide. We can use things to our advantage to help limit the amount of expensive fruit we use and still get maximum flavor impact. So the only thing, two things to take away from this page is don't ever add fruit to the boil kettle. You don't need to. It's not good. You don't need to do it. Even if you're buying dried fruit, you're not going to get better extraction adding it to the boil kettle. Never add fruit to the boil kettle. It doesn't benefit anything from hot side. If you're going to do it post-firm, fine. I don't care. Do it pre-firm, post-firm. That's your best impact. Fermenter. The other thing is fruit dilutes wort. It's not additive. I hope we all know this, but I've talked to enough brewers where they think that you're just adding gravity by adding fruit. Fruit's mostly water. You're diluting. So make sure you consider that when you're factoring in ABV. And if you ever wondered, like, why does my fruit beer keep coming out lower ABV than I calculated, it's because it's diluting your product. I'm not going to go over this. I just want to say that I built I've been brewing fruit. I'm a fruit-only brewery in Ohio, Urban Artifact. I've been a fruit-only brewery since the beginning. We've been 8 years of this. I have a lot of institutional knowledge that we built up over this. So I built this dosing guidelines. Here's the general one, but I have 55 different fruits on a huge Excel sheet that goes over all the different, and it has different notes, it's got different dosage rates, it's got fermentation considerations, something like strawberry. If you've never fermented whole strawberry before, there's a compound in the seeds that will turn vinyl during fermentation, which is disgusting. But you can get around that by cooking strawberries first, because that phenolic will volatilize off. So there's notes like that in there, things to be aware of. So I know this wasn't hella sustainability oriented as on my end of things, but hopefully it's getting you to think about how can I brew fruit beer, which is one of 3 growing styles last year, and do it in a way that's economical and fits within my brewery portfolio. So I know that was a mouthful, but thank you.
So, the malt and the fruit markets are trash. Good news for you, North American hops are very stable right now. So we're gonna go through, I'll talk about some pinch points where you guys can make individual decisions for your brewery to be more sustainable. But right now we don't have doom and gloom to throw at you from a brewery side. So for us, we look a lot at supply chain as one of our biggest areas that you guys can help make choices to improve your sustainability options. For us, we currently focus on our farms, and basically water and chemical usage is a lot of the projects we're working on with our farms right now. We also have been looking at ways to reduce our carbon emissions from bale transferring and receiving through our hop processing and operations, recapturing CO2, those sort of things. Our packaging and logistics, we're currently exploring Mylar bags and different options for Mylar, which is the one piece of our process that isn't recyclable. So that is a big piece of our goals. Then we're always factoring in downstream beer production. We're making a product, but could we advance that product to a way that's going to make it more sustainable for you? And then we are also thinking about the end of life and waste disposal for all of our products. We like to talk about the value chain. For those of you that don't know, we are a grower-owned organization. We're owned by 14 family farms. We operate similarly to a co-op. That's the reason I came to work at YCH, is that belief in that mentality. And we do have a very circular process. From the very beginning, starting with our farms, we are working with our breeding arm, YCR, Yakima Chief Ranches, to bring in viroid-free and healthy plants, essentially, and replace those year to year. We are working to plant, grow, and harvest every year, receive and package our products. And YCH in that time is trying to get information from brewers about how much they want to forecast, how much you guys might need for the future. Then we try to work with our growers to give that information back. For those of you that don't know, it can often take 2 cycles to get a full yield for a hop field. So once it's planted, that first year, especially in Oregon, they don't even harvest. They don't even string it up on the twine most of the time. So it's a lost year. It's very costly to tear out an entire field and then replant and restring. So for us, the best way to be sustainable is to be more concise with our forecasting, and that helps you guys in return to keep prices lower long term. We quote and contract you guys, plan and procure, and then YCR goes back to the farms with those details. You guys brew with it, let us know what you think, and we try to anticipate what you'll need 3 years from now at every given moment. We're not that great at it yet, but we're gonna keep trying. So we build into our contract model a 3-year contract, and that is because it really takes about 3 years for the farmers to get plants in the ground and match what you need. So the first year, we always tell you to contract for what you need. The next year, we step that down to 75% of what you think you'll need, and then 50% on that 3rd year. We don't want you to over-contract. We know that you guys have moving targets, and we want to try to keep everything as consistent for you as possible, but also consistent for our growers. Agronomics is our biggest piece where we can offer improvements through hop breeding. You can see that there's a lot more input that goes into our aroma varieties. Essentially, these are higher cost items that are cared for more intensely. We have to protect that investment essentially. Whereas with our alpha varieties, we don't have to input quite as much when it comes to total chemicals on those. So what are we breeding for? We are breeding for pest resistance, disease resistance, heat resistance, yield, water efficiency, and cost savings. We're also breeding for aroma, survivable compounds. So it's a very complex piece that we're trying to build together, but from a sustainability, we are always looking to create models that have disease and pest resistance first. And then we've also, much like the malting world, been working on drought-resistant varieties like Sabro and Talus. So to kind of give you a case study of how breeding can impact our total sustainability, these same acres require essentially the same input. So with these two varieties that can react very similarly in beer, you can get very different outputs, which means less in and more out is a much more sustainable option. So in this case, you would get 41% more hops from the same acreage with the same amount of input. So it's definitely a much more sustainable option. Another example would be Centennial versus a new experimental variety, HBC 638. Centennial is a bear to store. We have to process it almost immediately because it doesn't store well. So that has its own pieces of sustainability challenges for us. Whereas HBC 638 seems to store very well and it's yielding 74% more. So with the same acreage, we can get a lot more for this variety. Some of these older varieties just don't have the same makeup that we can create now to create better, more efficient products. Here is a slide basically just to show some variety substitutions you can make that are more sustainable. So for this section, the key takeaway for agronomics is consider replacing or reducing the amount of older, less agronomically sound hops that you may use, and look at some of the new, more modern cultivars, see if they can replace some of the challenges you might face. So product design is another huge piece for us. We started off with T90. Obviously, you guys have all used T90 pellets. Then we came out with cryo hops. Some of the sustainable benefits are, number one, it's 50% less weight to ship. It's a reduction in packaging. With less bract material, you get higher yields. It's a total cost savings. The cryo process also, we get another product stream essentially through the cryo process of separating the bract from the lupulin. And so we now have these hop varieties called American Noble that are concentrated bract pellets. So we're using both sides of that equation in different ways. CO2 extract is another great option, especially Kettle Whirlpool hop choices. You're working with a quarter of the mass. You're reducing a ton of your wort loss. Shipping, storage, and handling is so much easier on this. If you aren't using extract, there are a lot of options that we can help you incorporate in. Now to break that down, just in freight cost, you can see the difference between a pallet of T90 versus CO2 extract, and then the total carbon emissions from each. So obviously, this is a place where you can make choices as a brewer that can help the overall downstream effect. At YCH, the first thing we often talk about is if you're building a sustainability program, you need to start by setting SMART goals for what you want. Then we recommend benchmarking and with those goals and tracking your progress year over year. And as you roll your sustainability program, getting to a point where you have basically a report every year that you can share with your consumer base, share with your vendors, and it can be a partnership in increasing total sustainability. Like I mentioned, right now we're working on a recycling program for Mylar in the meantime until we can find sustainable packaging. We're currently working with TerraCycle and do plan to launch next year a recycling program very similar to the CMG malt bag recycling program. We also have a ton of solar power going for us. We have our Belgium facility, 50% is offset by the largest array of solar panels in Belgium, which is pretty darn impressive. We also have the largest solar array in Washington State. So we are continually investing in that renewable energy. We also have our Green Chief program, which is what we directly work with our growers on. From 2020 to 2021, we actually saw a 30% reduction in water use through this program, working with our growers and tracking. By 2025, we'd like to have all of our farms Global Gap certified and reporting on their carbon emissions and water usage so that we can relay that back to you. And that's what I have. We'll take questions now.
I think we lost our moderator, but if anybody has questions, feel free to let them rip. No? Yeah.
The country malt grain bag recycling program.
Sure.
Is that in place now? Is it?
Yes. Yeah, so we can operate that out of Champlain. You know, it's the consumer or the brewery. Can you guys all hear me? You guys need a microphone, right? I don't like to speak in a microphone. That sounds weird. The only thing is that the brewery is responsible for the shipping costs back to New York or to the Champlain warehouse. So we kind of encourage people to kind of gather up the bags, log them up, and kind of store them for a little while. And then whenever you have like a pallet full worth, you know, you can kind of reach out to myself or Jeff, and we'll take them back and work them back through. But yeah, it actually started over in the Vancouver warehouse. It's been gaining a lot of traction, and you know, obviously with the talk of sustainability, it's becoming something that, you know, it's a little part that you can do and kind of advertise to your consumers to make sure that you're doing something. Anybody else?
Yes, I had an interesting question regarding the whole fruit segment. Because you were saying with the water content and diluting the beer, would that be avoided if you use the freeze dried? I mean, you said it's way more expensive.
Oh yeah, good question.
Something that's like a dehydrated process or freeze dried and the water weight's kind of gone.
Yes, yeah, so freeze-dried fruit is basically DME of fruit. So yes, it does not dilute. In fact, we use, I do a dehydrated freeze-dried fruit beer every year, and I'm able to push it up over 15% because of dehydrated fruit.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the ass to work with. It doesn't wet well. It's gonna kill your yields, but it's a lot of fun and it tastes great.
Okay. And then going with dehydrated fruits, if it's in powder form, like it's been grinded, does that help the yield a little bit more?
I found that helps with, it helps because I can send it through my centrifuge. It's harder to wet. If you get like crumbles or something, that goes through that wets a little bit better.
Yeah.
But then you potentially deal with seeds where at least the powderized form, if the seeds are in there, it's all powder. So you don't really notice.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the ass to work with, but it's fun.
Sweet. Anybody else?
I just wanted to say, if you're interested on what YCH is doing as a provider to support sustainability initiatives, we do have these very unsustainably printed books at our booth. It's our CSR report we put out every year in April. So we do have these on site so you can see exactly what we're doing, and that includes more than just sustainability. It includes our company demographics and our work toward DEI as well.
United Malt Group also has a report that if you guys need, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we also have it on our website.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you, guys.